Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming on this lovely day to this lovely event. As most of you know, or at least a lot of you know, my name is Michael Clerizo, and for a living, I write about watches. Before we get started, we have some housekeeping to take care of. Many of you should see white cards, paper near where you're sitting. When are they out there? Well, James has one. Very well, James. If not, there'll be more outside. You should take those cards and write a question for the watch industry on it and hand it in when the event is over. And someone from the watch industry will answer it. Now, today, don't worry, I'll explain the slide in a moment. Our topic is the Epicurious Collectivist. Sounds like a bit of an oxymoron because, after all, Epicureanism is about pleasure and collectivist is about doing things together. And many of our pleasures are individual, but collectivist is about being together. What the topic is really about is how much and how we distribute knowledge about art, luxury, and culture. How much should we do this? Is there too much? Is there not enough? And is it different for many of us? Now, today, to discuss this, we have a young lady coming to us from Tunisia, I believe, Sofia Guellaty, who co-founded a website called Mille World. Very important because Sofia operates right at that nexus where art, culture, fashion, and lots of other things coincide. And much of her work, and I've read nearly everything in the past few weeks, is about spreading knowledge, and a very particular kind of knowledge, too. Also with us today is Jim McHugh, a legendary photographer from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, great place, who's taken photographs of many famous people, as well as photographs of many famous sites, but often with a twist, doing it in a different way. For our third guest, and I've always wanted to say this, needs no introduction, at least not in this room, so I'm debating whether or not I actually do say anything about him. But he is a big, well, at least you laugh, a big beast from the watch industry. François-Henry Bennahmias, the CEO of one of the great three brands, Audemars Piguet. Thanks. Now, we're going to start off, that slide. The reason for the slide is because knowledge and anything else can be made to look shiny and interesting. That is a packet of macaroni and cheese. Cost about $2.50, and Kraft makes about 4.5 million of them a year. But inside this particular packet was a crayon from the Crayola Crayon Company. And it's the only crayon they ever made in that color, C. Rex. Nobody's ever found it. It's worth $3,000. Well, when you think about what some watches are worth. And it goes up a bit every year, just like some watches. So the point of that slide is to make clear that anything can be packaged to look attractive, to look unique, and to have a level of exclusivity, as we expect from so many other things in life. Now, we're going to start with Sofia, because as I said, her work is, I like that smile. Her work is actually at that point where art, culture, and fashion meet. So, Sofia, can you hear us okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly. So, how much of your work do you consciously begin with thinking this is about spreading knowledge? Knowledge about whatever you happen to be writing about, any particular object, and also knowledge about the culture. You're a part of Arab culture, and the culture we often experience, Western culture, if that's not too big a question.
No, I think it's an easy answer. Everything I do is 100% about knowledge. I feel like today's responsibility when it comes to media is to filter through the amount of gigabytes of information that we have in the metaverse, which is a new keyword that people like to use. And so my job is 100% knowledge. It's 100% representation. It's 100%, I hope, a bit of useful information and a bit of entertaining thoughts.
And do you ever feel as if you're getting too much ahead of your audience? Or do you find as though your audience is really at the same level or even ahead of you sometimes?
In terms of what? In terms of knowledge, it depends how serious the topic is. But we are our audience. Today, you know, I feel like the media industry and the cultural industry in general is a collaborative, collective kind of endeavor. Of course, you have to have opinion leaders and you have to have luminaries that kind of show an unusual path. But for us, it's more about talking to friends about an interesting topic as opposed to being a teacher or prodigating whatever, sanctimonious message we have to convey.
I understand because stories are one of the ways to transfer knowledge and culture. So sitting around, talking to your friends, telling a story, is a very successful way to do that. But it's mostly verbal. Now, Jim, in your line of work, it's visual.
Yeah.
And some of the things you've done in photography have included images from ancient Western history.
Yes.
And also from the city where you live, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Things filled with mood, with nuance and meaning.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think your audience gets some of those references?
Do I think what? I'm sorry.
Your audience gets or understands some of the references in your work?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's funny, Francois and I were talking before. People really love old things. And I, not to do with pictures, but I have this Piguet or Audemars watch that was my grandfather's, that was a gift in 1953.
I didn't do anything, I swear.
And I wear it all the time. And I took it to be serviced after 10 years. And the guy said, oh, it hasn't lost a second in 10 years, you know? And we were just talking about how people value that. And I grew up in Hollywood, and my parents are from there. My mother was an actress and whatnot. And there's this period of time between, say, in the 20s or the silent movies and World War II, where that city was built. And so that's what I've photographed, the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel and the Hollywood Bowl and whatnot. And I think there's something very satisfying to people who see something that's existed for a long time. There's a kind of certainty in that, and there's a real sort of comfort in that. And that's actually what we're doing here, looking at some of the great architecture of the world is here. And I'm just very excited to be here about that. So,
do you find as though it's universal, both in terms of the planet and in terms of age, that your work has meaning around the world and through age groups?
I don't know. I don't know what people, I mean, I suppose if you're, as an artist or somebody that creates something, you make what you make, and what's going to happen to it, you know, who knows? But you have an idea about something that you want to do, and you hope that it will last. But at some point, you have to do what your heart tells you. I mean, I keep going back. I'm so impressed that I'm here on the stage here. You know, to make these fine watches like this over so many decades. I mean, it's such. You have to love it. It has to be from there, you know. And so I think most artists that are working, that's where it comes from the humblest person to David Hockney or to all of that.
Well, we'll get to David Hockney more in a minute. But I have a question for Francois now on this whole topic of art, fashion, culture, and spreading the knowledge. Francois, you did something revolutionary earlier this year. You took a luxury watch, the Royal Oak, and you put a comic book hero on it.
Yeah.
Are you wearing one?
Yeah, the Black Panther, sure.
Okay. So isn't this a bit of a contradiction in terms? You're taking mass culture that was both a comic book hero and you're putting it on a luxury watch. How exactly did you justify that to everyone at AP when you started?
So first of all, when you look at the history of watchmaking, comic book characters appeared on watches since the 30s. And then Gerald Genta in the 1990s actually gave a second birth to those characters, Mickey Mouse, Donald, Pluto, on his watches. So I looked at it 17 years ago and I say, who could be those characters of the 21st century? And Marvel came as an obvious answer. That was 17 years ago. When I met the people from Marvel in New York in 2004, they said, not a chance, we will not work together. And then eventually, we managed to go back at them, not in New York, but in Los Angeles, and brokered a deal to work for multiple years and multiple characters that start trading information. And that was, for me, just a culture shock, but not more than what we did with the hip-hop world in 2005 with Jay-Z, when we actually connected the world with music. And when you look at the world of fashion and the way it has evolved, I'm going to start with myself. When I used to work in the US, my very first years, I was wearing three-pieces suits from Giorgio Armani, and I slowly evolved, okay? And this is where I am today. But at that time, you had to wear a suit and a tie. Now the things have changed. The street has met the high-end world of luxury. And that's a part of the culture shock and exchange, which is for me very interesting because you learn much more than ever that nothing is forever. And the second thing is always keep the door open to the craziest possible ideas because this is the world we're living in.
I'm curious about something. Did Marvel say why they wouldn't work with you at
the
first?
beginning?
Yes.
My eyes. No, it's not because at the beginning I wanted to make a huge deal with the whole franchise and see if our watches could end up on the characters in the movies, which doesn't make any sense. Because they are superheroes, they don't need watches. So it was a failure. So I had the wrong pitch at the wrong time. When I say no, it's not about having his superheroes wearing the watches, it's having them on our watches, but to show also a craft that we have to basically sculpt those characters within the mechanism and still make the watch beautiful.
Why did you applaud the fact that superheroes are appearing on watches or superheroes don't need watches? Which was it, the people who applauded?
Because what?
It was a great film.
I think they're saying you did something right.
Okay.
Sophia, now a point that Francois raises, I'm very interested to hear your opinion about. From the street to haute couture, are you seeing that in your work as well?
100%. The world is changing. The world went from, and I'm talking about the genesis of luxury, a happy few selling things and artisans making them, to having those, luxury items offered to, again, a select happy few, but also with some enterprises. And now we, in the luxury industry, are listening to the streets to create. And this is completely new, when in fact, before it was, oh, come join our, super select club and let us tell you how it is. Now it's, kids, what's up right now? How can I cater to your needs? Oh, there is, lack of representation in Black people, and especially in the superhero industry. Okay, amazing Black Panther movie, amazing job. We celebrate excellence, we celebrate achievers, even us, Audemars Piguet, will align. And for us, it's like incredible to see that like new wealth of information and inspiration opening up. It's more inspiration at the end of the day.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to show you all another slide. Is this going to work? If we go like this. Oops. Okay. First of all, audience, who's the artist on your right?
It's David Hockney by Mr. Jim.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Very good.
And who is the artist on your left? Anyone? Who? Sorry?
Greco.
Speak up. El Greco, no. Sorry.
No.
Didn't mean to embarrass you there, Jim. No, that is one of the most iconic, important artists of Western civilization. That's Michelangelo.
Really?
And yes, it is. Really.
But at night, at night.
No,
No, just wanted to.
actually,
It's a fresco. It's a fresco or a painting?
no, it's an oil painting. And it
Ah,
was done while he was alive. And there are two theories. The painter is Daniele de Volterra, painted in 1545. There are two theories. One, that Michelangelo looked at it and said, "This is terrible, don't finish it." And the other one is that he looked at it and said, "This is wonderful. Leave it as it is." Because later in his work, he was in fact leaving things unfinished. Now, I'd like to ask the audience a few questions. Where do you think Jim's photograph of David Hockney is appropriate? Where should it be? Where would it hang? Where would you see it? In an art gallery in Los Angeles or London or New York? Okay, there's a few heads shaking there.
It should be in Salts Mill. Very good. Good answer.
Is that where it was, Jim?
Salts Mill is in Bradford, and that's where David's from. And yeah. So it's funny. It's an old mill. That's interesting. It's an old mill, an alpaca mill, which has been restored. David comes from this very small town in England, and that's a stump the band answer there, but that's quite good. Yes, very good.
And where do you think the Michelangelo one would hang?
In my bathroom, of course.
Okay, we could probably arrange that, you know. It
Thank
was in
you.
a Renaissance palazzo in Rome that belonged to a cardinal. Now it's in the Metropolitan in New York, but they don't have it on display. So isn't this an example of something we see going on in our world, which is art, which was once much more restricted to people who could afford it and who had a big enough house to display it, to what we see, the work that Jim has done, which we can all access, we can all see. Some of it's online. So, Jim, do you feel as though your work is accessible to people?
I hope so. Yes, I try to make my work accessible. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the photographs of David that you've done, you've called him a genius.
Yes.
You've actually said he's one of the greatest artists alive today. Now, what do you do when you have to approach an artist like that? Because Daniele, who painted Michelangelo, must have been intimidated. And what about when you photograph a great artist like David Hockney? And what's the message you're trying to get across about him?
I think I'm trying to think. I've photographed many artists, and usually they begin with like, oh no, I have no time for that, and then, well, maybe 5 minutes, and then you go, and then at the end of the day they want to show you one more painting. Let me show you one more painting. So I think, you know, all artists really want their work to be seen, whoever they are, and whether famous artists, not famous artists, you know, they work alone in their studios, they're by themselves, there's a tremendous insecurity it doesn't matter who they are, and to have somebody come to the studio and look at their work and talk to them, and I mean, for me, that's like a huge pleasure. So, there's a great artist, Robert Graham in Los Angeles. He's a sculptor who passed away, and he said, having somebody in your studio is like having somebody in your underwear drawer. Isn't that a great? And I remember that each time I go in an artist's studio, I remember this is them that you're walking around on, and you have to be very thoughtful about that. You have to be very sensitive to that. And David is a great example. There's a great quote, we were talking about it this morning, but that a great talent hits a target that no one else can hit. A genius hits a target that no one else can see. I think that's a really true idea of what genius is. And so certain artists that I've met, they're doing things that you just would not ever have thought about. And I just wanted to also say about culture. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years photographing graffiti artists in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is known particularly for script, for writing, for calligraphy, and whatnot. And it's really about gangs defining neighborhoods and whatnot. And this is a voice that has had no voice. This has been around a long time. They're never heard from. Nobody sees them. And suddenly there is a voice, and people are interested in what these artists have to say. And there was no place for them in the museums and whatnot. So this is a really great time that way, and social media has made a lot of that available. That's why I think like the watch that you're making of the film character and the new film character, that's so much of what is. It is what is, you know, it's a bold thing. Anyway, there.
So, with the graffiti artists that you're photographing, we see even more examples of the way knowledge is spreading today. It's going up, as Sofia said. And I think one of the most interesting things is the higher up echelons are acknowledging that there is art all over the place, really. But also, Jim, I think you've just explained to us why the painting of Michelangelo is unfinished, because he just wanted the painter to get out of his studio so he could get back to work. You know, he didn't like having somebody in his underwear.
I wonder. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the painting, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. Francois, I haven't forgotten you, so.
I'm okay.
You okay?
Relaxing.
You deal with a particular issue every day.
With particular?
A particular issue every day. The watches you create are expensive. And yet, so many people admire them who can't afford them. And I'd like to know, what's your attitude toward those people? Are you hoping one day they will be able to afford? Are you glad they're out there? And do you have to deal with a lot of communications from them?
I never look at it that way. Never. First of all, we know that when we are making, this year it's going to be 44,000 watches, next year we'll have 50,000 watches. We are not touching and will never touch the world, per se. But what are we really delivering to the world? Craftsmanship, exclusivity, history, echoes, tradition, and so many things that will actually trigger emotions on people. And who am I to say, or who are we to say at Audemars Piguet that we should have only these type of people or those type of people just enjoying watchmaking? There is a story where it was maybe a year ago, a French actor, very well known, came to our headquarters. And he came with his 2 children. He's got 5, but he came with 2 boys, 7 and 10. And normally we don't allow children because we're always scared that if they run, among the watchmakers, at some point the guy works on a piece for 1 week,
Oh, gosh.
and they have to go back at it. Anyway, but famous actor, so we said we got to take the kids. And on touring the workshops in the morning, we say, okay, they're going to be, in terms of attention, it's going to be okay for them 2 hours, then we'll have lunch, and we're going to send them to the chocolate factory in the afternoon. We're in Switzerland, so chocolate factory is good. And we're going to keep working with the dad. And during lunch, these 2 kids said, we are not going to the chocolate factory. We want to keep looking at watches, and they were supposed to make a watch themselves. That's what I love the most, because they don't even know if they will ever buy Audemars Piguet watches. They don't even know, but it touched them in a sense that we couldn't actually fathom. We couldn't expect a reaction like this. And that's what we love with people. I was talking this morning with the American University of Dubai, and I saw the kids looking at different things in different ways, and that's who we are. And if we can deliver these emotions to the people, no matter who they are, and what they do, so be it. We have to make people dream.
You have to make people dream.
Yes.
But I think it's interesting that you said the children were fascinated by watchmaking. Was it the craft, you think, that drew them in to watchmaking?
Completely. But actually, if I take everybody in the room right now and I bring watchmaker benches for the people who are not watchmakers, obviously, and I start to give you parts to assemble, okay, as a mechanism, men or women, we're going to have fun. And somehow, if you don't know anything about watchmaking, you're going to be blown away by the intricacy and the details that go into the making of those watches, and potentially 20%, 30% would say, wow, I want to know more. Just on the fun side, when I became the global CEO of the company, I had to basically learn a lot more about the watchmaking side of it, because I'm pretty good at selling, and I'm not very good with my hands. But anyway, so I went to the dial department, and they say you have to put the indexes on the dial. And the indexes on our dials, on the Rilo collection, are in gold. So every index has a value. And you have to use a little stool like this and another one to not scratch this little index. And after 1 hour and not one index would have seen the face of the dial and say, François, go back and sell. You're fired. I was not able to do it. But because I did it and I tried, I was then able to convey and deliver the message to other people that would not experience this and say, come, have fun. Let's see the way it works.
Sofia, as a writer, of course, you engage in a craft. But when you write about...
And as someone who did an Audemars Piguet ad as well, because we run a creative agency. I don't know if you knew that.
But if you write about fashion, which often appears in your magazine, do you find the same fascination with the craft of making something, making clothes? Are people interested in that?
Absolutely. I mean, as I was saying, we run a creative agency, so we're now responsible for the communication of some of the world's biggest brands for the Middle East. And what we're telling, the story that we're telling when we write articles or when we do, campaigns, and we did one for Audemars, we're telling stories. And, the playful experience that this kid had at Audemars Piguet is what people want now, beyond the product. And so it's all about how things are made. Of course, it's interesting, but it's also about, can you hear me? Am I lost?
No, you're on, you're fine, we can hear you.
Okay. It's also about having some sort of fun with it, having an information and knowledge about it. It's really, really now in our job as editors, as content creators, about making sure that people have an experience out of it. And we're in the world of storytelling and experiences beyond just the product. You know what I mean?
Yes.
People want to be told stories.
Okay.
And not facts.
All right.
And not figures.
Thank you. Now, we're going to show another slide, And soon after that, we'll open up for questions and see what you all think of this one.
Huh.
Okay. Audience, on your left, who's the guy playing the piano in the band? Come on. I heard Mozart.
Yes.
Very good. That's who it
Oh,
is.
of course.
It's Mozart. There he is. I think actually that's a harpsichord. I should not have said piano. Excuse me. My classical music teacher would be very annoyed about that. And
Chuck Berry, Chuck Berry, Chuck Berry. Garbage. Chuck Berry.
we can get pills for you later on,
Yeah.
Francois. Okay?
Chuck Berry.
We love this game. See, games work for knowledge.
Right. Why are these two men? Well, it's Mozart, his father, and his sister, who was also a great musician, and one of the greatest rock and roll blues musicians ever, Chuck Berry. Because when we talk about spreading knowledge, when we talk about the Epicurious Collective, pleasure that we experience together, there's a certain quote from Chuck Berry that I think sums up the dichotomy between mass and elite. And it is, what happened to the quote? Okay. Technology. The quote is, see if anyone knows what, anyone had ever heard this before. Chuck Berry once said, exact words, "We ain't doing nothing that Mozart hasn't already done." And what he was saying with that is, hey, the experience and the pleasure you get from listening to Mozart, and like a lot of jazz and rock and roll musicians, Chuck Berry enjoyed classical music enormously. He said it's the same as the pleasure you get from listening to Mozart. Mozart will deliver you to the same place that a Chuck Berry classic like Johnny B. Goode delivers you to. At any rate, that's the theory. So, at this point, we're now going to open up to Q&A, unless... Okay, audience, any questions? James Darling. James Darling here in the front.
For François-Henry, the...
Yep.
So, yep, I'm on. One of the things that people look for in collecting now is personalization. And we're seeing people ranging from people like Bamford Watch Department all the way up to Atelier de Genève doing customization on watches. Is that something that you've ever thought about doing within the company?
That whole notion of customization has been in the works for years and years and years. Okay, so originally, maybe 10, 15 years ago, no, actually I could go back to the 1920, because we have a watch called the John Schaeffer, when John Schaeffer wanted his initials instead of the indexes or the numbers on the watch to have his own letters that would spell his name. And that was in the 1920s. So that was the beginning of personalization. We could go back even earlier than that, with kings and queens ordering specific things for them. But now what we've seen is this: why the world of luxury has expanded. And too many times people call luxury items which are not luxury anymore. It's a bit of mass, it's a bit of luxury. It's expensive, but it's delivered in huge quantities, which could be a question mark on the true definition of luxury. But that said, because of that and the education on these fields, people want to get things much more made for them. So you could see this in cars, planes, boats, watches, fashion. They want their own imprint, their own signature. They want to feel unique. And in that respect, we have a lot of work to do, because it's one thing to change the color on a dial. It's another thing to put stones on a watch. But when you start to say, I want a mechanism just made for me, then you go into a field which is very, very complicated, takes a lot of time, and obviously a lot of money. But we will eventually get there. It's much more a matter of how long is it going to take. But have we seen a rise of people wanting things done for themselves over the last 3, 4, 5 years? Absolutely. Now, why people want to buy things like this and why do they have these characters or other things anyway? In the watch world right now, you've got everything. You've got the absolute true lover of watchmaking, but you've seen now a lot of people who don't know much about watches who are going into watches because they know that potentially also they could be looked at an asset and put money in the bank because there is so much money out there. That's something else. Very difficult to assess exactly the way it works. Again, worlds are crossing. We have to be very careful. And beside that, the people we don't know yet that will come either to the Dubai Watch Week who don't know anything about watches and that will fall in love with them.
Fall in love with the watches.
Yeah, not me.
Well, we know that, Francois,
Yeah.
because you would be a difficult person to love, I'm sure.
I've got my wife in the room. We can talk to her if you want.
Any more questions, please? Yes, man in the front here.
Ahmed? No.
Actually, as a follow-up to that last question, you're touching on the investment side of things and people looking at watches as strictly hard good investment. How do you feel about that personally? Like very, very frankly, like your outlook on, like, because we're at Dubai Watch Week. This is very much a place of community and embracing the culture and the environment that surrounds watchmaking. It's two very different camps. So, like, yeah.
You want an on or off the record answer?
Oh,
If you want to give an off-the-record answer,
No, but let's put it this way. What has happened over the last 2 or 3 years is absolutely crazy when you think about it. Because when we release a watch, at whether it's 50, 60,000, the watch now trades for 3, 4, 500,000, what does it tell you? Is it real? Somebody told me recently that what goes up quick could go down as quickly as possible. And if the only reason that you start to buy watches is to eventually make money, then I'm not sure you should play that game for a long time. At the end, I'm much more in favor of people that will always obviously love enjoying wearing them. And you can trade, you can change, because you are not obliged to keep your watches forever. 30 years ago, when you were buying a watch, you were buying a watch for life. Now you don't do this anymore. You buy a watch, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, you want to change, buy another one. The notion of collectors has evolved as well. And who are we to judge? But I will always, and we will always facilitate the access of our watches to people that really want to enjoy them, wear them, because at the end, this is the true pleasure of life. Whether it's, again, we go back to cars, art, food, anything. Enjoy it for what it is. That would be my message.
That's the Epicurean approach.
Yeah, look at me.
Have the pleasure.
Can I just say, I was just thinking, I was just looking at you. You know, through doing these graffiti artists and whatnot, in terms of personalization, tattoo art is enormous. I just had no idea. I have a number of friends, I mean, they just make so much money. Travel, I'll be in Rio for 3 days, and I'm at the Ding Dong Hotel, and blah, 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 and people come, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, and that's where they put it. I mean, it's not my world, so, but I have, my very good friend Big Sleeps does that, and I'm just amazed at it, and he no longer, people come with drawings and whatnot, and they're tattoo artists who do that. But Sleeps is like, you're going to get what you're going to get. You know, you want it to say Joe, okay, it'll kind of say Joe, but I'm going to do my thing. And I've just been amazed at that. And you know, a watch is the same. Yeah, it's something that you want, and it's funny. I just thought about that. But yeah, anyway.
So are you saying
But
you're
also,
seeing?
if I... Sorry.
Oh, please. Go on.
Sorry, it's the big lady in the back. The big face. No, I wanted to say that in customization and making something individual is very much with the times. We're talking about the big luxury boom of the 80s. Everyone wanted to be that golden boy from New York, you know, or Beirut or whatever. And today people want to be very individual, very unique as they explore, you know, their own kind of brand. And so that's why they want their own customized thing.
And Jim, in photography, are you seeing inflation in prices?
Mike?
They can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now? Yes?
Go ahead.
I had no idea you cared.
Go ahead.
All right. Jim, in photography, are you seeing the same inflation in prices that we're seeing in watches? At least inflation, at least photography at the level you practice it.
Very good. Very good.
That's enough. That's enough.
CEO of a major watch brand hugged me.
You saw it here, the CEO of a major watch brand hugged me. See, they don't all dislike me. So, Jim, are you seeing the same thing in art photography?
I think you do. I mean, I think in photography, certain, you know, prices are certainly very elevated. What happens over time is hard to tell, you know, in a secondary market and in auctions and whatnot. So, you know, what will last and what there's a part of photography, there's a part of all art. It's fashion. At the moment, this is what's trending. But over time, certain things endure, and that's not up, there's nobody that decides that. History decides that. So, you know, there's a huge amount of sales and that. Then there's the artist that creates the work, and then there's time. Speaking of watches, there's time that decides what will happen, you know, ultimately. So.
Sophia, I see you nodding your head and giving the thumbs up sign, so you agree.
It's not about the price. It's never about the price. Prices are bubbles. It's about time, and you know, we see so many artists that are blowing up in price and then immediately going down, and only time will show, you know, how precious and really genius those artists or art pieces are. Don't believe the hype kind of message.
Okay. Audience, any more questions? Yes, gentleman with the beard there.
The mic?
Can we get him the mic?
Do I have to do that too?
Hug.
Mike is a very popular guy here today.
Do you want to borrow? You can borrow Francois. I mean, he'll come and hug you.
Do you have a mic for the gentleman here?
Yes. No mic? Okay, I'll get up. Oh.
Wait. I have to do everything today.
All right.
Huh? Okay.
Go ahead. I'll ask the next one.
Just relax, Francois.
I'm helping.
Well, my question is, recently you've been seeing many brands creating more limited editions. Like Audemars Piguet, for example, you find many limited editions, unlike other brands, like from the huge watch brands, just such as Rolex or whatever. I know every brand has its own strategy, but don't you think having way too many limited editions may decrease the exclusivity of having that, you know, particular watch as a limited edition for yourself?
Okay, so I'm going to share with you an exact number, because at some point in the history of the company, we are making a lot of limited edition watches in the early 2000s. And at some point, it represented up to 10 to 11% of our worldwide volumes. You know what's the number of limitation that we do today compared to our global volume? Less than 1.2%. So even though we launched special edition, they make a lot more noise today, but in terms of quantities, it's almost nothing. So compared to what it was, we made a huge change, because yes, you're right, ideally, we have to come up with the normal collections. But there is something you cannot compare us with. You cannot compare us with Rolex. It's not a judgment call. They make watches which are close to, their quantities are close to 1 million watches a year. Okay, we make only 45,000 watches a year. You know, the first time that we reached 1 million watches made by Audemars Piguet, it was in 2018. In September 2018, we finally reached 1 million watches made. So we monitor these very carefully, we pay attention to what we do, and we got to keep launching special editions, but it's a lot less compared to what it was, and the brand was not at that level, obviously. And don't forget, I know where you live.
Okay, we've got time for one more.
Audemars as a brand is a special edition. You know what I mean? This is it is a special edition item, as it is.
I love you.
That's true, yeah.
This is a very talkative panel. I don't really have much to do, so.
But the gentleman here.
One more question, and then we'll. Oh my. The gentleman back there with the white mask? Oh, no, that gentleman. Okay.
Hi, my name is Hasnain. As Sofia mentioned, metaverse. My question is, the art world is evolving, the watchmaking is evolving. Where do you see the landscape of watchmaking / art with all these NFTs and all these changes happening in the world?
Interesting.
Sofia, you want to answer?
Watchmaking and NFTs?
Yeah? Art
Okay,
in
I'm
general.
gonna give
Art
you
and NFTs.
I'm going to give you a very cryptic answer. It's all about time. So I think the real value in the metaverse and the digitalization, etc., will be about time itself and the commodification of time itself. Then, if watchmaking then can follow up on like having some territory in the conversation of digitalizing, you know, I'm going quantum on you guys, but you know, on the value of time itself, this is where they will have a role to play. But I don't know about if you guys at Audemars have projects, or if you, Jim, have projects of launching NFTs. That's another conversation. It's not for me.
So first of all, I have to say that lately, for the last maybe 6 months to 9 months, we are bombarded with offers on the NFTs world. Bombarded. And because people know that there is something. At the same time, and it's funny because I was giving the same thing at the university this morning, saying that I'm 57 years old. I was born and raised on things you could actually grasp and touch. So just the fact that our kids are telling us right now that they might enjoy as much living in the digital world as a real world, you have to rewire your hard drive completely. Because this is not us. Our generation will never get it to the point where it's going to go. And that's scary somehow. But the great news about this generation and this new generation, new people coming to the world, is unlike our generation, we were fed by our parents on knowledge, on everything. Today, our kids are teaching us. They are opening our eyes. They are bringing us to their world, and we are listening to them. And the great news about it, we learn as much from them as they learn from us. Sometimes they don't listen enough, but that's okay. But on the big picture, it's even better. It's the best of both worlds. We learn from each other. But as a brand, going to the metaverse, digitalization, and touching that world, will eventually go there. But we have to be very careful because there is something we can never go away from, is the core values of what we stand for. We cannot jeopardize the integrity of the company just to make an extra few bucks. Because there is a lot of money in that world that nobody knows where it comes from exactly. Nobody knows the game, the way it's played. And so we have to be very careful. Because there is the board of directors at Audemars, they are very simple people. They don't have private jets, art collections, they live very simple lives. And their number one mission they give us every year, and I've been managing the company now for 10 years, is make sure we're still there in 200 years.
That's a great question. I have to say, that's a really thoughtful question, indeed.
Out of time, it's written.
Yes, we're out of time, unfortunately. We're being told to wrap up, but we're having so much fun.
I know, this is very
Come
good.
on. I've never liked restrictions of any kind.